My stepsister ran off with my fiancé a week before the wedding, sending me postcards for months. But karma is very good. I, a 28-year-old woman, was engaged to my college boyfriend about 4 years ago. We were together throughout college and then got engaged at 23. We were engaged for a year, but a week before our wedding, he ran off with my stepsister. My ex-fiancé, Greg, 28 years old, and my stepsister, Melissa, 28 years old, eloped a week before we were to be married and left nothing but a letter for me. In the letter, Greg mentioned that he had started an affair with Melissa a few months after we got engaged and realized he couldn't marry me because it would be unfair to both of us, and also to Melissa, because they were the ones truly in love. He said he believed the universe had only used me to lead him to his true love, so he couldn't be with me anymore and deceive us all by pretending we would have a happy future by getting married. And that was it. They left, and I didn't see them again until recently. Greg's parents covered all the wedding costs, so I didn't have to pay for anything, as they were very embarrassed by what their son had done. But that was pretty much the last interaction I had with his family, as there was nothing more to discuss. However, my family was more than embarrassed. My parents were furious, and my dad actually started considering hiring a private detective to track down where the two of them were and bring them back home for answers. Just so you know, my dad is actually my stepfather, but he has been my dad since I was very young, and I have always treated him as such because to me he is my only dad, as I have never known my biological father. My father left our family shortly after I was born, and my mother never saw him again, as he had given up his rights to me and they had never been married. Then she married my dad when I was 8 years old. Melissa and I used to go to the same school, and that's how our parents met. But for some reason, Melissa decided she didn't like me and then went on to bully me for the next several years. She was a bully in the truest sense of the word, and she and her friends constantly harassed me when we were in school. It didn't even stop when we got home. She kept looking for opportunities to make me feel bad. I complained to my parents several times, and they tried to scold her, but it wasn't enough, and she wasn't even afraid of our parents. So she kept bullying me, and my school years were a total nightmare because of her and all her cronies. Just like my father wasn't present, Melissa's mother wasn't around either, but that was because her mother had passed away a few years after she was born. Her mother had died in the middle of the night due to an epileptic episode. So whenever my mother tried to discipline her, she would tell her she had no right to scold her because she wasn't her real mother. My dad tried to get her to stop bullying me, but it didn't work because she simply wasn't afraid of anything. They had tried everything, from scolding her to trying to talk to her kindly, but nothing made her stop harassing me. Occasionally, they even threatened to send her away, and she dared them to do it because she knew they were empty threats. And that was just in middle school. Over time, she only got much worse. By the time we were in high school, she had adopted a bunch of bad habits and was practically a juvenile delinquent. She had started smoking and occasionally sneaking out of the house to go drinking with her friends, who were just as bad as she was. It wasn't until she got arrested with her friends one night for breaking into someone's house, while drunk, that our parents finally decided to send her away and get her the help she obviously needed. After a few weeks of begging and protesting, my parents finally managed to get her into a rehab center for troubled teens. She wasn't happy about it, but my dad had been very firm and said that if she wanted to live with us and be part of this family, then she would have to get better because he couldn't allow this behavior to continue and let her trouble everyone else, as she was becoming a threat to society. She went away angry for several years and didn't return until we had already graduated, as she had enrolled in a school near the rehab center and was living with her aunt. I didn't see her during those years, mainly because I wasn't interested in how my biggest bully was doing. My parents visited her every weekend and asked if I wanted to come along, but the answer was always no. Her friends started ignoring me and pretending I didn't exist after she left, which made my high school experience significantly better since I no longer had anyone constantly bullying me. Melissa continued her education in rehab and then returned. The first thing she did was apologize to me for what she had put me through. She seemed a bit calmer, and I actually thought she had changed for the better, so I forgave her. Anyway, we were about to go to college in a few months, so it didn't matter. Once we started college, I moved out, and so did she. We only returned for holidays, and she was much nicer to me after that. By nicer, I don't mean she really behaved well with me. I mean she just ignored me instead of harassing me at every opportunity she got, like she used to in the past. To be honest, it was a very welcome change because I preferred being ignored to being bullied. Our parents noticed this but didn't try to force us to get along or act like sisters because, given our history, this was more than enough. Then I started dating Greg, and after being together for a year, I decided to bring him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. We all got along very well, and for the first time, I noticed that even Melissa was interested in the conversation, which was a rare occurrence since she returned from rehab. She and Greg really got along well, and after I started dating him, she began to show more interest in being friends with me and often reached out to me just to talk, which she had never done before. I didn't understand what was happening and had a little suspicion that maybe she liked Greg. So one day, I decided to ask her directly if the real reason she was trying to be friends with me was because of Greg or something like that, because I was paranoid. She laughed and told me that wasn't the case, but Greg had mentioned how good a relationship he had with his siblings at our first dinner together while talking about his family. And that had made her reconsider the way she had been behaving with me since she returned. So now she was trying to make amends and improve our relationship. It had nothing to do directly with Greg, but he had definitely played a role as the catalyst and forced her to reflect on our relationship. She told me she had blamed me for being sent away for a long time, but eventually came to accept that it wasn't my fault, and she had gotten herself into this mess with her terrible behavior. So it was about time she stopped punishing me for it and started to really be part of this family, and that wouldn't be possible until she sincerely apologized and actively tried to work on our relationship. I'm an emotional fool, and what she told me that day moved me so like an idiot. I decided to forgive her and be friends with her. And I guess that's what hurt the most because she betrayed me after being friends. We were on good terms for a long time, and she was actively involved in the wedding preparations. I wouldn't say we were best friends, but we weren't as bad as we used to be. As we rebuilt our relationship, we met at least once or twice every month and talked to each other. So by the time I got engaged, we were fine. Whenever we met at family events and things like that, they behaved pretty normally, so I never suspected anything because I had no reason to. Even after the engagement, they continued to behave as if nothing was happening, and not for a second did I think that maybe Greg had something with Melissa. It just never crossed my mind because Greg put on a really convincing act of being in love with me all the time he was cheating on me with Melissa. And she was very convincing in pretending to be my friend, so I didn't find out the truth until it was already too late and they were already gone. My parents wanted to track them down and bring them back home, but I convinced them to let it go because I just wanted to forget about everything. It was enough that the two of them had made a complete fool out of me and left a week before we were supposed to get married. I didn't want any more drama because I was really depressed and simply didn't have the strength. I spent the next week doing nothing but working and sleeping because I wanted to avoid facing my feelings. My heart was obviously broken and I was just numb, but the worst was yet to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, I received a postcard from Melissa from California. But that wasn't all because she had also used a bunch of pictures of her with Greg, and they looked really happy. It was very obvious that she was rubbing it in my face, because she even mentioned that she was sorry for the surprise before my wedding, but she obviously wasn't sorry and it was just meant to make me angry. That's when I realized that she had never really forgiven me for what had happened all those years ago, and she still considered me responsible for being sent away. And she had never wanted to be my friend at any point. She had just used me to get to Greg and I trusted her and let her use me. It was a really diabolical plan, I have to admit. For days after she sent me that postcard, I couldn't even sleep because I was losing my mind over this. It was a really traumatic experience for me, and I had to go to therapy for months to undo all the damage and deal with my trust issues. The postcard wasn't even an isolated incident, and she sent me postcards of her and Greg for months after that. It only ended after about a year because I didn't respond or participate in the drama. Our parents were really upset about it and naturally cut all ties with her after that. They didn't even try to contact her after the first postcard, and that was a big deal for Melissa because she was set to inherit her father's business. She was a business student, and that was part of the reason she chose that path for herself, because she wanted to join her father. But of course, after what she had done, our father cut all ties with her and told me that I could join him instead because he felt he had to make it up to me. But I didn't have a degree in business. I was actually a history student, and that didn't have much to do with business, so I needed to learn the basics first. My father said that wasn't a problem because he was willing to teach me everything he knew so that eventually I could take over the business instead of Melissa. So I agreed and started working under his guidance so I could learn how to run the business, and he could retire and hand over the reins to me. After a while, I worked very hard for a couple of years, and last year I was finally promoted and my father retired. It was an incredible feeling because I had started from scratch and had to learn everything, but now everything was running smoothly under my direction, and it has been for some time. Thanks to me, my parents can now spend more time together without worrying about the business because I take care of it. It's been like this for quite a while, and I practically stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father because that took up all my time. That, along with therapy, helped me move on, and I would say I have completely gotten over the past and don't think about them or what they did. I never thought they would contact me again, much less ask for help, because that would require a great amount of courage and a total lack of working brain cells to ask me for help after cheating on me and making a fool out of me and then rubbing it in my face too. But I guess Melissa and Greg really lack brain cells because they contacted me a few days ago. I was at home because it was the weekend, and around lunchtime, I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I thought it was the pizza I had ordered, so I didn't think much of it. When I opened the door, I got the biggest shock of my life when instead of a delivery person, I found Melissa standing outside my house, looking really worried. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited in silence for her to say something while I looked at her. I realized she was definitely here to ask for help because she looked really bad and her appearance gave it away. Even as a child, Melissa always used to dress well, but when I saw her, she was dressed in old clothes that were all faded and obviously had been bought a long time ago. Her jeans were too short, and she herself looked like she hadn't been eating. I had already decided that whatever she was about to ask me, the answer was going to be no. She said she needed my help because she and Greg had been struggling for a long time since he lost his job a couple of months ago, as he had started drinking instead of looking for a new job. And while she had been trying to find a job for herself, she couldn't because she had left everything to stay at home and do all the household work when she first moved in with Greg. And because of that, she hadn't been working recently, and the gap in her resume made her a bad candidate for all the jobs she had been applying for. She said she had heard from a couple of relatives that our father had retired and passed the business reins to me, so now she was here to ask me if I would be willing to hire Greg and give him something to do. Melissa told me she had come all the way here just to ask for my help and said she was sorry for what she had done in the past, but now she was counting on me to get her out of trouble. She told me she hadn't even approached our parents yet and had come directly to my house to ask for help because she knew I had a kind heart and felt terribly guilty for betraying me in the past. But she was sure I wouldn't refuse her now that she needed my help. Her sense of superiority was so ridiculous that I ended up laughing in her face and told her to look elsewhere because I don't hire cheaters. Then I closed the door in her face and went back to the living room, ready to call the police if she didn't leave my property soon. Luckily, she left that day, but she still hasn't left me alone. After her visit, the first thing I did was call our parents and tell them about it. They told me they had heard from a couple of neighbors that Melissa had come back to town with Greg, but they hadn't believed it. And we live in a relatively small town, so everyone knows everyone. Quickly, we were able to find out that Melissa had been here for about a week before she finally visited me and had been living with one of her high school cronies. It was probably her high school friend who had told her where I lived and also about the fact that I had inherited the business that rightfully should have been hers. And now she was really taking advantage of that. A couple of days after she visited me, she decided to go see our parents to tell them how ruthless I was being. She had hoped they would be on her side now that she had the upper hand in terms of who was suffering more. But she couldn't have been more wrong because my father told her that the business was now mine to run and that I could make whatever decision I saw fit. He no longer had a say in the matter because he was not going to be overseeing me. And my mother reminded her that she was the one who betrayed me by running off with my fiancé after pretending to be my friend for years. And now she completely deserved what was happening to her. She had lost the right to ask any of us for help, especially me, after having sent me postcards to torment me. She tried to defend herself by saying that all of that was in the past and that she was a different person now, but my parents told her she had to leave because they didn't want anything to do with her. That led her to throw a tantrum at their house and claim that they had always favored me over her and treated me like the golden child. She told my father that despite being his own flesh and blood, he never treated her that way and acted as if I were his only daughter and she was worth nothing to him. When he told her that he had made more allowances for her behavior in the past than any other father in the world would have, she said it still didn't matter. I had everything that she was supposed to have, including the business that I was boasting about. She said it wasn't even her fault that Greg had fallen in love with her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of with me, but for some reason she was the one being punished for it. And she claimed that the postcards she had sent were a genuine apology and she wasn't even trying to torment me. And honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that since my father told me what she said. In some way, it is true that she was supposed to inherit this business and be in my place, but she really lost it because of her own actions. I had nothing to do with that. I never told my father to cut her out of his life and pass the business to me. He did it of his own free will, and it feels somewhat unfair that she is blaming me for this. Also, what she said about me being the golden child is absolutely false. But I can understand why she would feel that way, because in her mind, she was the one who was sent away because I complained about her and her constant harassment. Having a parent decide to send their child away is a big deal, and I know it was hard for my father, but again, that is not her fault or mine. If he had not taken the necessary steps to prevent it, Melissa might have ended up being a criminal or something, because that was the path she was taking. Apart from that, I really don't believe she was trying to apologize with the postcards and was probably just trying to cover it up by saying it was a genuine apology. I feel bad for her because her husband turned out to be completely useless, although I dodged a bullet there. She actually came to me and I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her. So in a way, I regret treating her the way I did. I have everything now and she has nothing, so I can't help but feel sorry for her. That's just who I am as a person. Also, it has been a long time, and I don't feel like I should hold on to that grudge any longer, but I also don't want to help her in any way. The most I can do is give them my sympathy, but I really don't want to hire them or help them with money. I think it's enough that I even feel sorry for her after everything she put me through. Most people probably wouldn't even bat an eye. The only reason I even feel sorry for her right now is because this business really should have been hers, and now that I am in a position of power, I am finally getting back at her, and it just feels wrong. It could be because of what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe it's just imposter syndrome, but I feel weird about this. Am I the idiot for refusing to hire my ex-fiancé who ran off with my stepsister now that they are struggling with money and asking for help? Update 1. I had no idea what to do, and the comments here only confused me more because some said I was doing the right thing by rejecting them, and the other half said I had always been the golden child. And that's why Melissa started acting out. So this wasn't as helpful as I thought it would be. I decided to talk to my parents because whenever I have faced problems in my life, I have always gone to my parents for advice, and this time I did the same. They told me I had no reason to feel sorry for Melissa because we had all done everything we could to try to make her a better person. But if she wasn't willing to change at some point in her life, then there wasn't much we could do for her. My father told me he had every intention of letting her take over the business if she had behaved and been a good daughter. But she failed at everything and completely mocked our family. After that, it would be foolish to expect that I would let her take control or even be part of the family again. That made me feel considerably better because talking to my parents always does. So, I'll try not to feel guilty about things I no longer do. Update 2. It's been about a week since Melissa showed up at my door, and since her visit to my parents, we haven't heard from her again. I almost thought she had gone back to Greg until today when she showed up at my workplace to cause a scene. It was horrible because she just walked into the place. Then she stood in front of my office and started screaming about how I had stolen this business right from under her nose by pretending to be a good girl to our parents, to get their approval. Apparently, I was responsible for vilifying her by falsely accusing her of harassing me throughout our childhood, and even talking to my father to send her to rehab just to cement my position as the golden child of the family. She went on to announce that this business should have been hers, but now I refuse to even let her be part of it because I was jealous that Greg had chosen her over me. Unlike our parents who had always favored me, and since I wasn't used to being overlooked, I lost my mind and turned our parents against her. When I heard the shouting, I decided to go out and see it for myself after calling security. I tried to tell her to shut up, but she continued for a good few minutes until she was finally thrown out of the building. I decided to call my dad before calling the police to get his opinion, and he was furious. So, he told me to go ahead and call the police. Fortunately, when the police arrived, she was still lurking nearby, probably waiting for me to come out of the building to yell at me or maybe do something worse, like physically attack me. The police took her away, and she was charged with trespassing and disturbing the peace, but those are minor charges, and she will probably get off with just a fine or maybe community service at worst. But it will definitely be on her record, and that's never good. I told my dad that she had been charged and arrested, and I expected him to be a bit upset about it. But he just seemed exasperated and told me he was tired of this and wanted a break from dealing with her madness. Honestly, I feel bad for him because it must not be easy to have a daughter like Melissa and be blamed for everything that goes wrong in her life, even though most of the time, it's her own fault. Honestly, we've all been really patient. Update 3. Well, I think Melissa has gone back to California because it's been a couple of days and we haven't heard anything from her, which is strange because we expected her to lash out at us after her arrest. But my dad asked around and he was told that a couple of people saw her heading toward the bus station the other day, so I guess she's gone. Honestly, it's a huge relief that she's gone now because I really feared that she would try to do something explosive to get our attention next, and that's always bad news. I don't know what she's going to do now with the whole Greg situation because it seems unlikely that she'll get help from anyone else after this. I just hope she finds something to do and gets out of this mess. And no, I'm not even being kind or compassionate at this point. I have very selfish reasons for saying this, and that's because I know that if she doesn't find a way out of this mess, then she'll just come back here with Greg and bother us more, and I don't want that. So, I honestly hope and pray that she or Greg find a job and can support themselves. Either way, we haven't heard from her for at least a couple of weeks, and I'm relieved that this nightmare is over now.